I'm talking to you though. You're the stats guy.
Yeah, we're trying
You're the stats guy, and we're the homies.
What is up, you guys? It has been a while. It's been quite the summer. Got a job, which is exciting. More details on that later. I imagine actually that my job might come with an upgrade in terms of presentation, so hopefully that's the case. But let's get down to brass tacks. The NFL season is about to kick off. The 2024 NFL season is about to kick off. As you know, because you're avid fans, I have been predicting baseball games and learning a lot. And so we're going to get into the weeds of that particular expedition and how it has led me to a different conclusion than you might have seen in some of the other videos as to the direction I'm going to take the NFL prediction. But let's get to the chase. The chase is, I want to introduce you guys to ALGO 1.0. That's right. ALGO 1.0 is a formula for predicting the outcomes of NFL games before they happen. Much like I talked about methods of predicting baseball games before they happen. Okay. So we'll get into the testing, we'll get into the variables, we'll get into what I have found recently and why I think that I have found the things I have. But ALGO is an acronym, as you might imagine. ALGO stands for Automated Likelihood Guess or something. The name got about as much effort as the algorithm itself. It is performing quite well so far, just in testing, but and I'm way more hopeful about it than I am about baseball, even though baseball is doing fine. And we'll get into the reasons why, but basically, I wanted it to be called ALGO. I thought of calling it Homie because we're the stats homies, but I couldn't think of like a good acronym. Even this, I couldn't really think of a good like acronym for all the things to mean. And like likelihood, that's like a statistical thing. Automated, whatever. Guess is like, prediction or whatever. And then I like a stats word that starts with O. I'm sure that there's a million and I just can't think of any, but I didn't feel like looking it up. It was funnier to just go with or something. But anyways, here's the plan for the NFL season. Every week, ALGO will predict all 15 or so games, depending on the week. And so I'll be reporting every week how ALGO does. In addition to that, Greg, Nikki, and Greg's mom, Diane, will be predicting 4 games a week, just because it's going to be tedious to go through all 15 every week and just have it, I'm not going to do that. So we're just going to do 4. We're going to do the Bears game, Cardinals game, the Cowboys game, and a wild card game of the week, whichever one we choose. And so we will keep a running tally throughout the season of how their predictions, their gut predictions, are competing against ALGO's predictions. If they're doing better, if they're doing worse, it's going to be a lot of fun. But that is the plan. Now, if 2 of those teams play each other, then we will do 2 games of the week. So it'll always be 4 games a week. All right. So hopefully you guys get to see lots of Greg and Nikki making terrible picks because they don't know anything about anything, if we're being honest. All right. So I want to talk more about ALGO in particular, why I'm really hopeful about it, and the different approach I took from this to baseball. Okay? So, in the past, I have talked about what sorts of data are available to me as a statistician in order to predict prospective performance. That is to say, a game that has not yet happened. Now, why is it important that it hasn't yet happened? Well, what that means is we can't use the game data from that game. It hasn't happened yet. For example, if I wanted to go back to the 2023 season, I could tell you just how important every touchdown pass was on average, with respect to the outcome of the game, right? That is to say, Patrick Mahomes throws 5 touchdowns, and that's going to boost his odds of winning that game by 60%. That's totally made up numbers. But before the game, you don't know if Patrick Mahomes is going to throw 5 touchdowns. You don't even know if he's going to throw like more than 1, less than 2. You don't know any of that. He could throw any number of touchdowns from 0 to, I don't know what the record is. 8? I think the record's 8 or 9. He could throw anywhere in that range, and he might even break the record. But you don't know that before the game. And so that is by far the most useful data in terms of telling you the outcome of the game. And it's the only type of data that's not available to you. Okay, so what is available to you? Well, you have season performance, that is performance up to that point in the season. You have that for players and for teams. And then you have past performance. This is what I used for baseball, was season performance. Was a winning percentage up to that point. Was Pythagorean win-loss theorem up to that point. I thought that as a statistician, this is the best data to use because it's the freshest data. It's the newest data, it's the most up-to-date, and it's always being updated. So I thought, that sounds way better than using last season or even further back in the past. But a couple of things I have come to find out are season performance is highly, highly unstable because much like a game of basketball, a season, especially a long season, not so much football, but baseball and basketball are runs, right? You always hear about like they're on a 10-game win streak, they're on a 5-game win streak, that sort of thing. And so it becomes a question of how far back in the past do you go? Do you go from when the season started? Do you do a sort of rolling average of the last 10, last 15, last 20? And whatever you choose, none of it is stable. And so what ends up happening is, even if you use the largest possible subset of data in order to predict the future, from only this season, from the start date of this season, well, first, you can't use the first 10 games because there's just too small, right? If you win your first game, suddenly you're at 100%. And if you use that to predict the next one, it's going to be useless, right? So you have to use the aggregate of like the first 10, and then you have to roll out from there. Even more. I've done a couple of different analyses to figure out which is better. And to be honest, none of them are great. So for those reasons, season performance, I decided to go in a different direction. It's something I can tinker with. It's something I might use in concert with past performance. But in general, here's what happens. If you look at data from year to year to year to year, there is much less fluctuation in the overall, like, let's say, number of wins. So the Cowboys are a great example because they always win like basically the same number of games or right around. And for a long time, when it was a 16-game season, they were like 8 win, 8 win, 8 win, 8 win. And so if you took their performance from the season, like maybe they had a hot start, but they ended up at 8. Or maybe they had a cold start, but they always ended up at 8. And so if it's more stable to look across years than it is to look at their performance that far up to the season, because you could call it regression to the mean. I'm not sure if that's entirely accurate, but you could call it regression to the mean where most of the roster is the same. The coaching staff's probably similar unless it got completely overhauled, which does happen. Ownership's probably the same. The facilities they use are the same. So many of these factors are staying the same, and thus the end result is probably not going to be too dissimilar from the past. There are exceptions to that rule. The Lions have been winning a lot more than they did in the past. They have been showing a clear trend. So for that reason, I'm not going to do anything crazy like I could take the last 10 seasons and average them or something like that. I'm not going to do that. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take performance from the last season. And I'm going to take specific key player performance, that is to say quarterbacks. We all know who the key players in football are. And I'm going to take some team performance. And that's what I'm going to use to predict games. So we're going to talk about some interesting findings. When I was analyzing all this stuff, I came across some interesting trends. And so I do want to talk about some of those. And then we'll talk about the numbers of how I expect ALGO to do. So this is not an exhaustive list of the variables that I looked at for the purposes of prediction, but it is almost exhaustive, and it is the most interesting ones that I found. So this really represents my effort level, as you can see when approaching this. Didn't have a lot of time. Didn't have a whole lot of willingness to go as in depth as I did with baseball, because for two reasons. One of them is, my God, is it tedious, and the other one is, I felt like I had learned enough from doing all that in baseball to know where to save some time and effort, and it seems to have worked actually. So let's talk about it. First thing I put it in the middle here, but home field advantage. It is stronger, as you might expect, stronger in football than it is in baseball. Baseball, you can expect home field advantage alone accounts for 54% of the, so the home team wins 54% of the time. In football, that's about 56% of the time. That makes sense. Fewer games, more rabid fans, other factors like turf versus grass, like weather, I feel like more factors than in baseball. Baseball's played in slightly warmer weather for most of the year, and there's just so many more baseball games. I feel like the players are a lot more comfortable on the road, whereas you might only play 8 times on the road in football, and so that's a big deal. It's a big deal. You only play 8 times. It's not a whole lot of time to get used to it. But anyways, that's just speculation. So home field advantage plays a bigger role. And in fact, it is greater than 50%. That's what we're looking for. We're looking to start from 50 because it's logistic regression. Logistic regression means it's a binary outcome. And in this case, we know that it is exactly 50 average because one team wins and one team loses. But you start from 50 and you want to go up from there. And the magic number is sort of 60. Now the betting numbers, which I'm not too worried about, might shake out a little bit differently, where 60% might have been enough to turn a profit in baseball, but maybe not because the lines are different in football. I don't know. I'll have to do some testing. But it's better than 50, and so it's something that you want to include, and I include it by default. Then you have something very interesting, which is home win percentage versus away win percentage. Okay, so now if I asked you which of these two is more useful than the other, you might think about it for a little while. Does the advantage that the home team has outweigh the disadvantage that the away team has? That's a bit of a weird question. But basically what I'm getting at is only the away team's win percentage actually makes a significant difference in prediction. If you only take the home team's winning percentage into account, what you end up with is a rate less than 50%, which is to say that this variable is almost exclusively noise because we already know that the home team has an advantage. So trying to quantify even more advantage on top of that only muddies the numbers and makes it harder to predict what's going to happen. On the other hand, the away win percentage is quite important when trying to predict a game. Well, why is that? Here's how I think about it. Home teams have a baseline increased advantage to win the game, pretty much no matter who they're playing, right? The only reason that they would lose a game is if the away team was significantly better than that advantage. And that makes a ton of sense, right? You're not worried about bad teams coming in and beating you on the road. Maybe for the Cowboys you are, because they lose every game they shouldn't. But that's a lot more rare than if the 49ers come into your house and beat you. That's something you're worried about. Why? Because the 49ers are a good team. You're not worried about the Panthers coming to your town and winning. You're just not. So that seems to go with like fan sentiment and also like talking head sentiment. The road, like in college football 25, composure only matters on the road. right? Your ability to keep your composure and play super well only really matters when you're on the road. And I think that that's reflected in the data because only away win percentage made it into any of the models. All right, so then let's talk about these stats. Opponent passer rating and then the home passer rating. So when I say opponent, because of the way that everything's coded, opponent means away. So the away quarterback passer rating versus the home quarterback passer rating. A little bit of risk when using this because depending on last minute changes, if there's an injury, if it's TBD, something like that, then you might not expect a whole lot of knowing which quarterback's going to start. But assuming that we know, I would say the majority of the time, like 80% of the time, we know who's going to start on both sides. I felt comfortable using this statistic. And so actually both of these are slightly helpful, but if you use them together and do the difference, it's really helpful. So what I'll be using in the model is a difference of passer rating on average. And the passer rating comes from the previous season. Now this is important because the previous season is the most recent data we have, and it's also typically a larger set of data for the most amount of people. The thing is, good starters start most of the games for most of the time. And what I mean by that is Tom Brady started the vast majority of Patriot games for like however many years he was around, 15 years or whatever. And I'm banking that is more important than rookies and guys who are getting their shot starting a couple of games here or there. Where it gets murky is the paradigm of starting a rookie quarterback right away and letting them play a lot. Trevor Lawrence, this just happened to. Caleb Williams, it's probably going to happen to. And so I don't have any data for them. I also don't feel comfortable using their college data in any sort of meaningful way and trying to translate that to NFL because it just doesn't translate to NFL 1-to-1 or even on some other scale reliably. And so what I'll be doing for those guys is I will be imputing the data with the league average from the previous year and hoping that basically they are average quarterbacks on average. So that's the approach I'll be taking for this stuff. We'll use away win percentage, we'll use the home field advantage by default, and then we'll use a different score from the passer ratings. Now, which of these is the best? Using just win percentage, away win percentage, or just the passer rating differential, you get about a 59% success rate when predicting games. That is awesome, especially for a single variable. And again, it's taking that 56% and giving it the nudge it needs to get into sort of profitability for football games. Furthermore, the football data, and especially when we use past data, seems to be much better at predicting losses. So one of the things about the baseball data is that it's really good. It's at that 60% threshold for predicting home wins. It's really bad at predicting home losses, which is the other side of the coin. I'm not sure why that is at all, really. But basically what I have come to the conclusion of is it has to do with the instability of the interseason statistics I was using. Whereas this is not dependent on that. This is dependent on your performance from last season and your quarterback's performance from last season. And so it's a little bit more stable in that respect, and it's able to predict losses better. So how it shapes up is, this is ALGO. ALGO is the intercept, which is essentially the benefit from being at home, the away win percentage, and the passer rating. And all of these are just terms, and then they would have a coefficient related to them, and then that's how the actual prediction occurs. And then I've gone through this before with the baseball stuff, but you put it all into logistic regression model, you do some transformation, you get out probability, or actually first you get odds, and then from the odds then you get probability 0 to 1. It is performing on last season's data at about a 61% win rate, which is awesome. And wins only is about 63%. Now, with the baseball data, it was typically like overall it was about 56, 57%. And then one of the better models might be close to 60, just under 60 for the wins only. It's really encouraging to see that there is very little change, which means that it's just as good at predicting wins as it is at predicting losses. Maybe slightly worse, but for the purposes of keeping up with Greg and Nikki and Diane, I think it'll be better for that purpose. But yeah, so that's pretty much it. These are some of the things I found that were interesting, some of the things that I gleaned from doing all the baseball stuff. And I think that next year, I've kind of given up on baseball this year, if I'm being honest. Not because I wasn't having a ton of success. I wasn't having a ton of success, but I was definitely like above where I wanted to be. I was discouraged by a lot of the instability numbers because what it turned out was each set of games you use to predict the following set is really unstable. So like I might be above 60% for some of it, but then I might be at like right at 55, and then some of them might be below 50. And so it averages out to a favorable number, but it's like playing the stock markets. It's like it gets way too volatile, and then you're like, I don't want to be down for a whole month, but that's the whole amount of data that you use to predict the next month, blah, blah, blah. So it just went all over the place. I'm going to look to do a different, a past performance approach for next year and see if that's more stable. Hopefully it is. But this will be a testing ground for ALGO. I reserve the right, Greg and Nikki, to change ALGO in the middle of a season, right? So obviously, you might see ALGO 1.1, 1.2 some point during the season unveiled. I doubt I'll do anything like that early on, but maybe in the middle of the season I'll do a little revamp. So I will not be putting the weekly stuff on YouTube. I'll only be doing short, like minute max videos to do our predictions for the week and then how the week shaped up. And we'll keep track of it. We'll have a big tracking sheet and we'll see who's doing the best. And I'm pretty sure Algo's going to beat them all because I mean, maybe Greg is just really good at guessing and we should bet based on his guesses. But I just don't think that it's feasible to accurately guess games that you have an emotional stake in. You have to do it objectively from a third party. And Greg's going to assume he's going to win. He's going to get hot. He's going to like Caleb Williams. I already know that. Nikki might be a little bit more agnostic towards her favoritism, but I still think she's going to assume the Cardinals are going to win a little bit more than they should. Diane is a freaking genius, so she's probably going to be the only one who beats Algo. We'll see. Yeah, if you're interested in this stuff, stay tuned for the future, and I can talk more in depth about it. We'll probably do like a mid-season roundup and see where we are at that point. But yeah, until next time, we will see you on Tuesday. That's right. It is currently Saturday. So our first set of predictions are going to be Tuesday. Probably won't be up till Wednesday. But yeah, that's our cycle. It's going to be Tuesday recap, Wednesday new predictions. All right. Have a good one.